Hey guys, Greg Nelson here. Hey, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me on this video. I wanted to talk to you about our brain a little bit. And when we're trying to manifest our burning desire into reality, sometimes we'll be putting the work and the effort and taking all the correct steps in order to do that. But we run into a wall that scares us like a monster living under our bed. Like when we were little kids, I mean, it scares us. We don't want to go near it. It's like touching the hot stove. You touch the hot stove, it burnt your hand so bad. You remember the red coils, everything, and you know you're not going to do that again. Well, all those memories, those are stored in our hippocampus, and our amygdala is an almond-shaped portion in our brain. And what that does is that's like our old crocodile portion of our brain. It's our reptile brain from when we were even cavemen, and that is our fight or flight method. It's there to protect us. It's like our frenemy. It keeps us from harm, or it thinks it's keeping us from harm, but in reality, it's probably holding us back from achieving our goals. So what we have to do in this situation is we have to be aware, we have to be self-aware of when this situation's happening, quickly recall the past, try to figure out what happened and what could have been done differently, then block it out, and then move forward. And so I got this little diagram if you've seen my videos in the past, you've seen my little brain dude. And so I just wanted to lay this out because I think this is really knowledge of how this works and why it's working. If you have the understanding of this, when you face these situations, these roadblocks, these barriers, as Bob Proctor calls it, the terror barriers, when you face these terror barriers and the only thing you want to do is get back in your car and drive back home or go back to the office or flee the situation, maybe you're trying to achieve a goal like you're trying to open a business in a certain portion of town and you need to speak to somebody in City Hall about zoning ordinances. You open the front door, then all of a sudden you see somebody that you had a situation, an episode, a relationship with, something that ended very unfavorably. And it happened 5 to 15 years ago in the past. And there was so much emotion tied into this one person in this one situation that your amygdala is going off like a 4-alarm fire, and it's making you act in irrational ways. It's freezing you up, and you don't know why it's doing it. I think we've all can remember a situation in the past where we've gone somewhere, or we've seen somebody, or we thought we've seen somebody, or we thought we've recognized a situation, kind of like a deja vu, and we went back into our car, or we went back and we walked the other way. Or maybe you're walking down the street, you're going out for a nice little daily walk, you're getting your miles in, and you see a person, a figure, maybe a block and a half on the other side of the street that's walking towards you, and you remember maybe 30, 40 years ago when you were a kid playing in the street, there was a figure like that, and maybe that figure, you saw a fight break out or something like that. Well, you see that figure in today, and you see it coming, it immediately puts that image back into your head, pulls it from that file from our hippocampus, and immediately goes, is this situation, is that figure, is that shadow, is that a fighter, is that BS? Is it going to hurt us? Is it going to affect us emotionally or physically? What's it doing? And so now so when you cross these things, when these things happen to you, just understand that it has probably less to do with you as a person today and more has to do with a situation that's happened in the past. Maybe you open that door to that zoning office and it's a spitting image of the person that you used to know. In fact, you had to do a double take just to make sure it wasn't the same person. But your amygdala is still going off like a 4-alarm fire, and it's visually throwing those images of that situation back in your head. It's pulled that file from the hippocampus, and now you do the same thing. You run away. This is just one example, but you could relay the hippocampus to probably most of the things that are holding you back from moving forward with achieving your goals and turning your burning desires into reality. So I wanted to run through this with you and just kind of give you an understanding of how the brain, how this works, and what happens and why when we freeze up, that it probably has less to do with you as an individual today, currently, and more have to do with something or a situation similar that happened in your past. And also, not just things that happened in your past, things that have been passed down to you too. So maybe there's stories that your grandparents told your parents. Maybe that story, it was a bad story, a scary story, but it was meant to keep your mother or your father out of harm, and they heard it at a really young age. And they all of a sudden had this really strong image of bad things happening if they went and did that. And so maybe they tell you the story when you were little, and they're passing that, it never even happened, but they're passing that mental image of fear into your head. And now that's went into your hippocampus, went into your mental file cabinet. And so now when those situations arise again, your amygdala makes us act in, as I said, it makes us act in irrational ways, and it's trying to keep us from emotional or physical harm. It's the explanation of the amygdala and the hippocampus. I just wrote down a couple other things that are less important to this, but I also want to really talk about the neocortex too, because there's something really important about the neocortex that falls into line with the amygdala and the hippocampus, but we'll get to that in a moment. So your prefrontal cortex, that's the portion of the right up here, and it's involved in many complex cognitive functions, also stores short-term memory. Say you're working on an assembly line and you're told to put this part here and this part there and that there, then send it on and quickly move to the next one, move to the next one, move, right? And so that stores that in our short-term memory. If we do it long enough over time, puts it in the mental file cabinet. Let's say you're working on the assembly line and there was an accident that happened on the assembly line. Something had to get stamped and then moved on to the next person, maybe to drill a couple holes, then move on to the next station, maybe to get paint or whatever. Well, maybe with that press that came down, maybe somebody's hand slid underneath. Maybe it wasn't your hand. Maybe it was your hand. Maybe it was somebody who was standing next to you and that hand slammed. But you remember that, oh gosh, it was horrible, just horrible. Stores in your short-term memory. Think about it. We just keep thinking about it. And we go back to work and we're working on the assembly line and they talk about it all the time. Hey, remember, let's not remember Frank and his hand that got smashed in the press. And so safety first, right? And so now that's all stored right here in your mental file cabinet. And then, so the next time you're working on the assembly line, maybe 2 years down the road, 4 years down the road, you're working on the assembly line, drilling your holes. The guy's working the press next to you. It's not Frank. He went on and, did something else with his career, probably went into something that required work with his feet, not his hands. And so you see this guy's hand maybe slide, and then all of a sudden your amygdala, whoa, you freak out. Maybe the guy's being completely safe, but you just see his hand slide over maybe just an inch, close to that press, and you freak out. You stop the assembly line. You shut the whole thing down because your amygdala makes you act in irrational ways based off of emotions. It immediately pulled that file from the hippocampus and made you act in an irrational way. And now you shut the whole assembly line down. And the guy next to you is looking at you like, dude, you need to retire. You need to go do something else. Take the rest of the day off. You're unsafe here, right? And you're trying to be safe. And so that's just like a kind of a little brief analogy of what happens with the amygdala. And so try to relay that to your goal and your barrier that you're trying to break through. So the neocortex lays on top of our brain. It's just thin layers that just, layer after layer. And that's our sensory perception. And it's the generation of motor commands and spatial reasoning. And I also put the basal ganglia in there. That's motor memory. We don't really need to know much about that. Just understanding that when we move like this, that all has to do with our basal ganglia. Or when you're driving down, remember if you've seen the video where I talked about starting your car and commuting to work and getting to work and not remembering anything about the drive, not remembering stopping at stoplights, not remembering changing lanes, not remembering taking right or left hand turns or braking. That's because of the motor memory. That's a pattern that has been stored in the hippocampus and is probably being partially run by the basal ganglia and the prefrontal cortex. But anyway, our neocortex, now this is very interesting. Oh, I just found this here recently, but over time, information from certain memories temporarily stored in the hippocampus is transferred to the neocortex. And it's transferred as if it's knowledge. So your bad memories that you've had in the past, not only is it those memories being stored, but after a period of time, when you keep dwelling on those or maybe bringing them up and it's just so vivid and you're freaking out, that's being transferred to our neocortex. And now your brain thinks that it's absolute knowledge. Unreal. Unreal. So, researchers think that that is all done when we're sleeping. What does that all have to do with anything? Well, if you relay this to the walls or the barriers that you're trying to break through in order to manifest what it is you want into reality, then understand that those situations, those roadblocks that you run up against, not only has it been stored in your mental file cabinet, it's also been transferred to your neocortex as knowledge. Okay, as it's real. So when we run into a similar situation, we freak out like that. Just what we got to do is we got to recognize the situation. We have to tell our amygdala to, thank you, friend, I have this. I'm going to take this from here, and we need to just forge forward and just break through that. Once you do that, that memory gets weaker, and you keep doing that. If you have to do that multiple times or break through those multiple barriers, does it ever go away? It may never go away, but you will make it so weak that it will never arise again. Or if it arises again, you just brush it off and just take it as a grain of salt. It's just one of those other bad thoughts that are coming into your head that you're blocking out. Hopefully the understanding and the knowledge of this will help you be able to break through the walls and the barriers that you're facing. Thanks again, guys. I hope you have a great day. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. We'll talk to you soon.